Unfortunately, this compound is very difficult to produce. It's very expensive. One of the steps in its chemical production is explosive. So our laboratory can only produce milligram quantities. So we could treat very, very few patients only. And we are still looking to raise funds to write a large contract with one of the commercial companies to produce large amounts of these compounds to do some significant clinical studies. But nevertheless, it appears that we can develop compounds which may protect against new unknown viruses, probably newly emerging from the tropics or used in bioterror type attacks. Next one. Another interesting feature which seems to be a consideration for protection against all kinds of new viruses, which we don't really know yet, is the fact that vitamin D apparently is very much involved in activating the immune system. In the old days, we thought that the only function of vitamin D is to help with calcium absorption and calcium deposition in the bone, and it protects against osteoporosis. But then it turns out that vitamin D has many other activities, including activating the immune system. Now, in our clinics in Buffalo, which is, of course, up north, we find that when we look for vitamin D levels, 70% of our patients, some of them with very little problems, health-wise, but 70% of our patients are deficient in vitamin D. Today, in Buffalo, there's not that much sunshine, even in the summer, but all around in our whole country, people sit in the house, they don't go out to the sun very much, and if they do, and if they sun themselves, they put all kinds of smears on their skin to prevent skin cancer. But thereby they also decrease the skin synthesis of vitamin D, and a very large number of our population is vitamin D deficient. Now we have an argument again with pharmaceutical companies. Many people are taking multivitamin pills every day, and multivitamin pills usually have 400 international units of vitamin D in it. Yet we found that probably our requirement is about 1,000 international units, and pregnant women and older people who don't absorb vitamin D that well maybe need 1,500 international units. So a multivitamin pill, even though it has vitamin D in it, is not adequate. And we are giving all of our patients vitamin D3 pills on top of the multivitamin pills which they are taking. I don't have time to go too much about the normal functions of vitamin D, but I'd like to mention something in the next slide. We'll show that again our chemists at our chemistry department in the university produced a large number of vitamin D derivatives, which we tested for their biological activities, and we found some compounds which have very much less effect on the bones, but are far more effective on activating the immune system. We also find that some of these compounds produce differentiation. In other words, we can take certain type of cancer cells in tissue culture and change them back to normal cells by using some of these compounds. Again, the problem is that some of these chemical groups can provide us with milligram quantities of these compounds with which we can do in vitro experiments and some very limited experiments in mice, but we need funds to write a contract to produce large amounts so we can do some clinical studies, particularly in cancer patients. If we could find good drugs which produce cancer cells to differentiate to normal cells in man, we may have an approach of non-toxic cancer drugs. But this is all in the future, and right now we are just going around with a little tin can trying to collect enough money to write some contracts and have some commercial guys give us large quantities of this. Next slide. Now, in our studies against what we can do about major catastrophic episodes health-wise, there's a simple one I may mention. During the World War I and even some wars since, the problem was that if severely wounded people were quickly taken care of by medics in the field, the medics often had great problem giving intravenous injections and replacing lost blood because the veins all collapsed and they had a hard time finding the veins. And particularly under gunfire with difficult veins, we sometimes had to abandon the patient and let him die in the field rather than saving him. Now, what we did, we developed a system where we treated our medics. All right, if you can't find a vein, take a bone marrow needle, bore a hole into a bone, preferably the pelvic bone, but if you can't find it in the mediastinum, and give the injection not in the vein, but into the bone marrow. You can't miss it. Add a little hyaluronidase, which helps it to get through the tissues, and by using bone marrow needles, we not only manage to treat patients with collapsed veins, but when these patients are then put on trucks and carried to health stations and hospitals and all that, the needle can't fall out like an IV needle can, and if the patient is unruly, he can't pull out the needle and get into great trouble that way. Now, actually, I have a collaborator who is now working on a new bone marrow needle specifically for infusions. And so these are very simple matters, but it does save a very large number of lives, even